If I remember correctly, I just assisted with him. I don't remember if I did assist or handcuff someone else. I don't believe I did.
Do you know if you pointed your handgun at any of the individuals?
I had my gun at the low ready. All the gentlemen on the pier complied with the orders and basically had their hands up. So at that immediate moment, I didn't feel the need to go ahead and aim it directly at them.
Okay. But the other 3 officers did all point their firearms directly at the individuals, didn't they?
After reviewing the cameras, yes.
So you were the only officer of the initial 4 responding who kept your gun at low ready?
Correct.
And part of that was because the other 3 officers were somewhat in your line of fire to the citizens, right?
They were more of going to be the engaging. So realistically, if something was going to happen, I would have been the cover person. I would have been able to react best to, worst case scenario.
Right. So you were providing essentially cover for the other 3 officers?
Correct.
That was your role at that point?
At that point, which was moving very quickly, once I realized I had more subjects than I thought.
Sergeant Baldock, whose decision was it to approach these individuals in this tactical formation?
Before, to the best of my recollection, we talked about how we're going to approach these gentlemen before we got on the pier, and we all came to the agreement, we're going to approach tactically with our weapons drawn, safely securing each one, and then once they're secure, started the investigation, figuring out what's going on, why are these guys here, see if everything checks out.
At the time you walked onto that pier, had you been given any information by any person that these individuals had made an aggressive move towards anybody?
No.
At the time you walked onto that pier, had you been given any information by any person that these people were in the act of committing a criminal offense?
No. Other than open carry.
Okay. Which you now know wasn't even a crime.
Correct.
Objection in the form of the question.
With the
question.
With the exception.
Take a breath in between, so let us object.
With the exception of the fishing or hunting.
So it's your understanding that open carry is a crime unless you are hunting, fishing, or camping?
Correct.
So open carry is also a crime unless you are a law enforcement officer?
Correct.
Okay. So equal weight, right there in the same statute, right?
Correct.
So it's not really an exception as much as it is the law of the state of Florida, right?
Correct.
Objection in the form of the question.
The form of the question.
So the fact that you believed they were committing the crime of open carry when you walked out there was more about your lack of legal knowledge and lack of your knowledge of Florida law, and not the fact that they were committing a crime, right?
Objection in the form of the question, argumentative.
The form of the question, he wasn't wrong, he was right about the law.
You can answer.
Okay, repeat the question.
You did not have knowledge that fishing allowed them to openly carry at that time, correct?
Objection in the form of the question.
At that time, my top priority was officer safety and safety of the public.
Not the question I asked, sir. Madam Court Reporter, can you read the question back?
Question, you did not have knowledge that fishing allowed them to openly carry at that time.
I'm going to object to this entire series of questions. Simply fishing under the statute does not vitiate the crime of open carry. There are numerous other elements.
Mr. Rosenwald, that is, number one, a speaking objection, which we know how Mr. Switkus feels about that. And number two, your legal opinion is not my concern right now about what the law does or doesn't say. I'm asking the officer a question.
Well, what my concern is that you keep representing to him what a Florida statute says, and you're telling him something that's not true. So if you want to keep misquoting the law, you go ahead, but I'm going to make an objection to it.
Okay. So, officer, you now understand that it is not a crime to have an open carried firearm while fishing, right?
Objection in the form of the question.
I understand that, yes.
Okay. But that was not your understanding on the day of this incident, was it?
Swarm.
Join.
You can answer.
My understanding at that moment was that they were open carrying.
And that they were violating the law by doing so.
Correct.
Objection to form.
And the fact is, back up. What is your understanding of Miami Beach Police Department's policy regarding when you should draw your weapon and point it at another human being?
When there's a threat level there.
Okay. And can you describe what that threat level looks like based on your understanding of the policy of the Miami Beach Police Department?
If there's a threat level where you're making an interaction with someone who's known or possibly carrying a weapon,
Okay.
a threat to the officer or the public.
Okay. Anything else?
If I feel either myself, my officers, or the public are in danger,
Do you need all three of those, or just one of them's good enough to draw and point your weapon at somebody?
I feel pretty comfortable with one of them.
Okay. So is it your understanding then the mere fact that somebody is known to be or is possibly carrying a weapon, that authorizes you to draw and point your firearm at that person?
Objection in the form of the question.
That you can answer.
In my training experience, if I know there's a weapon in play in an investigation, I'm going to use everything to my tactical advantage to first secure that weapon before I continue my investigation.
So is it your understanding that policy and your training dictate that you disarm any person with a firearm who you encounter?
Objection in the form of the question.
If I'm conducting an investigation.
So if you see an individual who is carrying a firearm, is that enough for you to conduct an investigation right then?
If I
Objection in
see,
the form of the question.
if I see an individual carrying a firearm, they're already violating the open carry.
Well, what if it's concealed and you see the bulge?
Objection in the form of the question.
If it's concealed, depending on the situation, we may approach. I'd have to see, there'd have to be a situation.
Okay.
Obviously, if it's concealed and it just pops out, that's different than someone who's openly carrying.
All right. So is it your understanding then that any person open carrying, you are then allowed to go up to them and detain them?
Objection to the form of the question. Counsel, you've kind of danced around this for the last half hour, but go ahead.
We will
answer again.
investigate it.
You will investigate any person who is openly carrying a firearm?
I would, yes.
Okay. And does investigate mean you will detain that person?
Yes, we may detain them.
And if you detain them, you are absolutely positively going to disarm them, aren't you?
Yes,
No exceptions.
no exceptions. For the time being.
Once you discover that they are not committing a crime and have that firearm where they are lawfully, does the Miami Beach Police Department have a policy on how you return that firearm to that person?
Objection in the form of the question.
Object to the form of the question.
Can-
the
can-
same
would-
objection.
Would either of you like to let me know what problem you have with the form of the question, specifically?
Read the question back and I'll give you a lot of reasons.
Okay.
Question, once you discover that they are not committing a crime and have that firearm once you discover that they are not committing a crime and they have that firearm lawfully, does the Miami Beach Police Department have a policy on how you return that firearm to that person?
Okay, it is a compound question and it assumes scenarios that are too numerous to indicate, and it's based upon a reasonable investigation, and no officer can be definitively positive that a crime might be or might happen or will happen because it dispels his initial suspicion.
Okay.
That's the nature of my objection.
Mr. Rosenwald, you want to add anything?
I do. You keep making this false statement that once the officer has determined that no crime has been committed, and the duty of the officer is not to determine whether a crime has been committed, in that whether the fishing, hunting, and camping exception applies. There are also other elements to that, such as that they're not convicted of a crime, they're not a drunk, they're not other things that the statute lists, which the carrier of the gun has the duty to establish as an affirmative defense. Those things were never considered in this case, and the officers had no way of knowing whether those things were true. And so you keep saying once it was established that they weren't breaking any law, the officers did what they could, but it was the duty of the guys carrying the gun to establish whether they were breaking the law, and they never did it in this case. There's not a shred of evidence that they did so.
We're gonna explain. We're gonna explain it to you, man.
Hey, if you can, excuse me, officer. I'm not trying to resist, but you see that little paper over there? You see that paper?
Relax.
Hey, excuse me, sir.
Okay, go have a seat. We'll talk about that.
But see that paper over there?
We'll deal with it. Go have a seat for me first.
This is
Go across your legs for me. Thank you.
I just don't know what's going on, guys, because you should know the friggin' open carry statute while you're fishing, hunting, or camping, but obviously you don't. Excuse me, sir. You see that over there by that black bag? There's a Florida statute right there that'll help you understand why we're out here. No, sir. But, sir, you see where you're looking? No, not mine. Excuse me, sir. Officer William? Or Villamont? Excuse me, sir. Mitchell? Can you look at that little paper right there next to that black bag? It'll explain the Florida statute while open carrying, while fishing, hunting, and camping. I'm just trying to help you out.
We'll figure it out.
I understand. Sir, I don't consent to you searching my bag.
Reference what?
I told you about the little friggin' that paper that right there that would explain that we're all legal citizens and we're not doing anything illegal. This is yeah, I got squid and shrimp. I'm fishing. Right now, this is not helping me out. This is.
You know what it is?
What is it?
Officer safety, your safety.
I'm not. I wasn't threatening nobody.
I know, but well, we don't.
I wasn't hurting nobody. My name's Mike Taylor. What do you want to know?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rosenwald. All right, Sergeant Baldock.
Yes.
There came a point in your investigation on Sunday, June 24th, 2018, where you decided you had to release these men, right?
Correct.
At the point you released them, was it your opinion that no crime had been committed?
At that moment, under my investigation, I did not find a crime being committed.
Okay. Is this the first ever scenario in your employment that you have encountered where you took a firearm from somebody and had to return it to them when you released them?
No, this is not the first time.
Okay. To your knowledge, is there a standard operating procedure regarding how to return firearms in the Miami Beach Police Department's policies?
The specifics, no. Not to the best of my knowledge at the moment. Kind of have to review the policy.
Do you have a standard procedure in how you return firearms after you determine that the person should get it back?
Common practice with all Miami Beach police officers. Once it's deemed that no crime has been committed and the person being investigated has done nothing wrong, usually we'll safely return the weapon in a safe manner, for example, the trunk of a vehicle or a glove compartment, and then we explain to them once we walk away, you're free to go ahead, put the weapon back together and holster it, concealed or whatever it is, however you had it stored.
Okay. And so you stated, though, that this was the standard procedure of all officers in the Miami Beach Police Department.
Yes.
Where did that procedure come from? Did you create it?
I did not create it.
Okay. Is it written down in some manual somewhere?
I would have to review the manuals.
Okay. Have you reviewed the manuals before or after this incident to see if there's any standard procedure in there?
No.
Okay. Is that how you were trained to do it?
Yes.
Where did you receive the training to do it in that manner?
Field training officer when I was on FTO, okay. Being trained by a training officer.
Training officer of the Miami Beach Police Department.
Correct.
Approximately what year would that have been?
2010.
And you've never been told that procedure is improper or shouldn't be used?
Objection in the form of the question. You can answer.
I've never.
I just asked if he's ever been told that it's improper or shouldn't be used. Not that it is. Have you ever been told that is an improper procedure or that such a procedure should not be used?
Objection, form of the question.
No.
Okay. I said, is your policy or procedure of how you do it to leave people unable to utilize their firearm until you have left the scene?
They are unable to utilize their firearm until we leave, correct?
Okay.
For our safety,
Okay. For your safety.
yes.
What about for their safety?
Once we leave, they can get their gun.
Well, what about their safety between you leaving and them getting it back loaded? Does that not matter?
Objection, the form of the question, argumentative. You can answer.
Yes, it does matter.
It does. Yeah, that's a yes, it does?
I would say yeah.
Okay.
Safety always matters.
Is your safety more important than a citizen's safety?
My safety? I view the public more important than me.
But, so do you view a lawfully armed citizen as having a equal or greater safety right than yourself?
Objection, the form of the question.
A lawful,
A lawfully armed citizen, do you view them as having an equal or greater right to safety than yourself?
they have every
Objection. Objection, the form. Go ahead.
right as any other person in public.
And that includes the right to keep and bear arms, doesn't it?
Correct.
Includes the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, doesn't it?
Correct.
Once y'all had concluded that these individuals were not committing a crime by once the decision had been made by officers on the scene, whether yourself or Lieutenant Garcia, not to arrest these individuals for open carry, did they then search other items that the individuals had on the pier?
I don't remember searching. I mean, all they had was the coolers.
Okay. Do you remember yourself or other officers searching the coolers?
We may have opened them. I could assume that. I don't remember.
What grounds would you have had to open those coolers?
To verify if they had fishing equipment, I guess, fishing bait, things like that.
Do you remember any officer suggesting that the cooler should be searched for alcohol to see if they were violating the no alcohol on the pier rule?
I don't remember if that was mentioned, but it may have.
Okay. Did you have probable cause to believe that there was illegal alcohol on the pier?
Objection, the form of the question.
No, we didn't. Overall, I didn't have any suspicion of an alcohol issue.
At any point were you given any information that these men had taken any affirmative action or demonstrated any behavior indicating they were a threat other than the fact that they possessed firearms?
Objection, the form of the question.
Just the information of our men through dispatch on the pier, and of the interactions with the park ranger, and the possible fact that they may be sovereign citizens.
Would you agree that none of the two or three things you just described are acts or demonstrations or actions of the individuals, but rather information you were given?
Objection, the form of the question.
I'm going off based on information I was given.
Okay. Were you given any information that any of them had been aggressive to anybody?
I don't remember getting that information.
Were you given any information that any of them had pointed a gun at anybody?
No.
Were you given any information that any of them had threatened anybody?
No.
Did you get any information that any of them had displayed their firearms in a rude, careless, angry, or threatening manner?
No.
So at the time you approached them, you had no information of those types.
Of those
Objection,
things,
the
no.
form of the question.
And throughout your entire investigation, you never obtained any information, intelligence, or report that these men had engaged in any rude, threatening, or aggressive manner towards any person, did you?
At the conclusion of the investigation, no, we didn't find any of that.
Okay. Who made the decision to close the pier down at the end of the event?
Sorry, at the what?
Who made the decision to close the pier down at the end of the incident?
Lieutenant Garcia did?
And was that to make sure that those men had to leave?
Objection in the form of the question.
I can't answer for Lieutenant Garcia.
If the pier had remained open, if the pier had remained open that day, did you have any grounds to make the men leave once y'all's investigation was concluded?
No. And actually, we even advised them that if they wish to continue fishing on the rocks there, they were allowed to.
Okay, but you weren't going to let them continue fishing on the pier.
Lieutenant Garcia made that decision.
Do you know why?
I can assume because we would be getting...
I don't want you to guess, but if you know, you can answer. But I don't want you guessing.
Okay, I'll let him answer that then.
So did Lieutenant Garcia ever advise you or tell you why he was closing the pier down?
I don't remember having that conversation, or I can't remember if we did the exacts on that conversation.
Is that possibly one of the conversations you had when you turned your body cam off to talk to him?
It's
Objection
possible.
in the form of the question.
It's possible.
Okay. Do you remember any specifics about any conversations you had that day with other officers when you were turning your body cam on and off?
To the best of my knowledge, we were just...
Okay, you can answer that question yes or no, but there's a specific provision of testifying about police tactics that we're not going to go into today.
Okay.
So if you remember a specific that is not divulging police tactics, you can answer the question. This answer can be yes or no.
Yes.
You do remember that you had those discussions?
I remember turning off the camera and having discussions about the investigation.
Okay. Were some of those discussions about tactics, police tactics?
No.
Okay, so none of the discussions you had when you turned off the cameras were about police tactics?
I believe not.
Okay. Do you remember what the conversations were about in any of the 17 different times you turned off the camera?
Most likely updating the lieutenant on the records checks of the individuals, just getting updated on what they came back. Most likely making sure when the records checks on the guns came back, they were clear, which I think they were. And then I remember him having on the phone with his higher-ups on how to basically handle the situation.
Did he ever tell you who he was talking to on the phone in terms of higher-ups?
I don't remember. That was...
You don't remember who he told you, or you don't remember if he told you?
I knew he was talking to higher-ups. I don't remember who. So his job at that moment was talking to them, and my job at that moment was just, supervising the investigation.
Okay. Once you had determined that everybody had fishing licenses,
Mm-hmm.
and that everybody was fishing,
Mm-hmm.
and once you had back records checks on each individual,
Mm-hmm.
Interrupt him. Let him ask the whole question, because I'm going to interpose an objection, and if you keep saying, we don't know if it's to this
Gotcha,
question
gotcha.
or that.
I will start all over, Bob, just to make it easy for you.
God bless you.
I'm going to list a list of things that I saw performed on the video on the radio traffic, okay?
Okay.
I saw you, or some officer. I saw some officer. Check the backgrounds of each individual. Yes? Go ahead, Bob.
Yes.
I heard radio traffic where they checked out each gun.
Yes.
I saw y'all investigate whether they had fishing licenses.
Yes.
You had already observed that they were fishing, right?
Objection in the form of the question.
I observed the fishing poles with the lines in the water, yes.
Okay. Is there some other definition of fishing you know of?
Objection in the form of the question. Argumentative.
I never witnessed anybody holding
Okay.
a rod when we approached.
Do you have to be holding a rod to be engaged in the act of fishing?
Objection in the form of the question.
I would have to review the statute.
Okay. Do you fish, Officer Baldock?
No.
You ever been fishing?
Yes.
Have you held your fishing rod the entire time you were out fishing?
No.
So can we agree that merely having that, can we agree that you do not have to hold a fishing rod the entire time in order to still be engaged in the act of fishing?
Objection in the form of the question.
Yes.
Are you aware of any specific Florida law that says you're only fishing if you're actually holding the pole?
I am unaware of no specific law.
Did you do any research that day to see if you had to be holding a fishing pole to actually be counted as engaged in the act of fishing?
Tim, objection in the form of the question.
I remember probably after the incident reviewing the statute.
Did you find any such requirement in the
Holding?
statute? That you had to be holding the rod at all times in order to be fishing?
I don't recall that you had to be holding it the whole time.
You don't recall whether you found that information or you didn't find anything?
In
that
the
said
act
you
of fishing and hunting or going to and from your vehicle. I remember those verbiages.
Okay. So once you had, we discussed checking the person, checking the gun, checking the fishing license.
Mm-hmm.
Once you had all three pieces of that information back, why did you still need to detain them at that point?
Objection in the form of the question.
Checking the backgrounds check on the 6 men or 7, I don't remember the exact number, and the firearms took a little bit of time with the records channel.
Okay.
While that was going on, Lieutenant Garcia was talking with higher ups. I can't say what they were talking about, but I also had to wait on his orders on what to do with these men. But once it was discovered that, if I remember correctly, once it was discovered that everything checked out, that's at that point, that's when we went ahead and started unhandcuffing the individuals.
So you're saying you believe that y'all started unhandcuffing them as soon as you knew that all the guns were clear and all the backgrounds were clear?
Once our alarm, that these guys aren't criminals, they don't have criminal backgrounds, that they're allowed to have these guns, they're not any alerts on any terrorist group or convicted felons or mental health personnel, that they're normal people, and the guns cleared, no stolen firearms, our alarm was, it's dispelled our alarm, so we went ahead and unhandcuffed them, yes.
That wasn't the exact question I asked. The question I asked was, is it your contention that they were unhandcuffed as soon as all people and all guns had been cleared by the background checks?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay. All right. And do you have any idea at what time point, how many minutes into the incident it was before each of the individuals' backgrounds had come back clear?
I'm gonna assume it was right before we unhandcuffed them, and then after reviewing the camera yesterday, between the time we approached them on the pier to the time we started unhandcuffing them was roughly about an hour and a half, I would say.
I said an hour and 18 minutes. I think that might even be closer for you.
What's that?
An hour and 18 minutes.
Possibly.
So we'll say an hour and 18 to an hour and a half.
We could say that.
So does it take an hour and a quarter to get background checks run on 6 people?
I'm not a records the dispatcher, so sometimes it's quicker, sometimes it's longer.
But are you saying that you think that morning it took all of that time just to get back hey, this person's not a felon, this person's not prohibited from owning firearms?
We would have
Form of the question.
We would have to review the records channel transmissions, but to the best of my knowledge, that's how long it took.
Have you ever encountered an individual before with a concealed carry license issued by the state of Florida?
Yes.
Have you ever found a stolen firearm in the possession of a person with a concealed carry license?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Have you ever found a person in possession of a stolen firearm who also had a Florida concealed carry license?
I don't believe I have, but I can't say for certain.
Okay. Did you also run all their concealed carry licenses for those that had them?
I believe we did.
Okay.
I would assume we did, so I'm pretty sure we did.
Officer, do you have a concealed carry license?
I do.
When did you get it?
Maybe 8 years ago, I'm guessing.
Before this incident?
Yes.
Okay. And if you've had it 8 years, you may have even had to renew it at least once, right?
I believe I just did last year or this year.
Do you remember when you got that license, filling out an application for that license with the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services?
I remember filling out a form.
Okay. Do you remember having to sign that form?
I'm sure I did.
Okay. Do you remember that form stating that you were signing it under penalty of perjury? Or under oath or anything like that?
I'm sure I did.
Okay. Do you remember that form stating that by signing it, you were stating you had read and understood all the provisions of Florida Statute Chapter 790?
I don't remember that.
Okay. If I told you it's absolutely on that form, would you have any reason to dispute that?
Objection to the form of the question.
No, I don't believe. I'm sure it's on there.
So did you actually read Chapter 790 before you filed that?
I probably didn't.
Was there any reason to close the pier that day other than to make sure those people were not allowed to stay on that pier?
Objection to the form of the question.
I didn't make that decision, so I can't.
Didn't ask whether you made the decision. I understand you didn't, Officer Sergeant Baldock.
Yep.
I'm asking, to your knowledge, was there any reason that pier needed to be closed other than to make sure those individuals did not stay on that pier with those firearms?
Objection to the form of the question.
I could assume we closed it to avoid future calls of people calling.
But you don't know of any specific reason it needed to be closed other than to get those people. Let me rephrase. I'll rephrase it. You have no idea why the pier was closed other than the orders of Lieutenant Garcia?
I can speculate. Let's say.
I'm not going to ask you to speculate because Mr. Switkus would want to jump across the table at me.
No, I don't have the reasoning.
Okay. As you sit here today thinking back, was it necessary to close the pier at that point for public safety?
Objection to the form of the question.
It wasn't my decision. I don't know if I would have made that same decision or not.
Well, tell me this. Looking back on it, do you think it was the right decision?
Objection to the form of the question.
I don't know.
You don't have an opinion or anything regarding Lieutenant Garcia's decision to close the pier?
Lieutenant Garcia gave an order, and I follow it.
Do you believe you're under some obligation to follow every order you're given, sir?
No.
Okay. Just want to see if we were clear on that. Do you, based on your experience, knowledge, work as a law enforcement officer, can you identify for us today any reason the pier needed to be closed on June 24th, 2018?
To avoid future calls.
To avoid future calls for what?
Objection to form. Go ahead.
It's very likely, as the day progressed, since this was still early in the morning, people would have called saying, hey, there's people in the park with guns, which we, a lot of people in this city, when they see something suspicious, they call, and we investigate.
All right. You investigate all calls?
All types of calls, yes.
You investigate any call that comes in?
If it's, for the most part, yes.
Okay. Is the fact that somebody might be uncomfortable or call you later about the same event a reason to close a public park?
If a call of a gun or a weapon comes through...
Not my question. My question was, is the mere fact that somebody might call because they dislike somebody's behavior a reason to close down a public park?
Objection to the form of the question.
I'm not sure. I'm probably not.
So you think you might have had the decision been yours, close the park in order to prevent having to come back out on another call for these men with guns. Is that what you're telling me?
Objection to the form.
I'm trying to understand.
That would probably be one of the factors.
Okay. Any other factors you'd think?
At the end of the day, we have people with guns. Anything can happen.
Okay. And you didn't think it's okay to, you didn't think it was a good idea for them to have guns out on that pier, did you?
Objection in the form of the question.
If they're law-abiding citizens doing nothing illegal, there's nothing. My opinion doesn't matter.
Okay.
Which, even though we closed the pier, we still afforded them the opportunity to continue fishing.
As long as they weren't going to fish on the pier.
Objection in the form of the question.
The lieutenant made the decision to close the pier, so the pier was off limits.
Okay. Was there anything wrong with the pier?
No.
No structural defects?
No.
No dangerous thing going on the pier?
Objection in the form of the question.
No.
There was no reason for the pier to be closed other than to make sure that those 6 individuals were not on the pier with guns, was there?
Objection in the form of the question, argumentative.
Was there any reason other than making sure those 6 individuals were not on that pier with guns to close the pier down?
Objection in the form of the question.
Like I said, I could assume.
I didn't ask you to assume. I asked you if you knew of any reason to close that pier down other than to get those 6 people off that pier.
Objection in the form of the question.
No, I guess.
Okay. To your knowledge, has there been any change in policy that you have been instructed to adhere to regarding how to deal with lawfully armed citizens since June 24th, 2018?
Since the incident, we did have our quarterly training, which did focus on the incident.
Okay. And what were you told in that quarterly training?
Basically, the laws on that statue reference hunting, fishing. You are allowed to openly carry.
Okay.
It is allowed.
Were you told that you should continue to investigate every case where you see somebody open carrying?
Objection in the form of the question.
You were either told to continue investigating every one of those cases, or you were told not to continue. What were you told?
Objection in the form of the question.
If an officer sees something suspicious, or if we get a call, we'll investigate it.
Okay. And so you were told that if an officer sees something suspicious, or y'all get a call, you will investigate.
Yes.
And based on your prior testimony, if you're investigating a person with a gun, you're going to take it away from them, right?
Correct.
Okay.
For the time being, until the investigation's over.
Have you received any training or instruction about whether you have to have a reasonable suspicion that they are a felon prior to detaining them to conduct a background check?
Objection in the form of the question.
It's kind of hard to tell if anybody's a felon unless they're a known felon by someone. I won't know that until a records check.
So does that authorize you to stop and detain any person you see with a gun so that you can make that determination?
If they're open carrying without a fishing pole, yeah.
Okay. What if they're open carrying with a fishing pole?
It'd have to be have to see the circumstances. Are they fishing? Are they walking down Lincoln Road with a fishing pole? 2 different scenarios.
So if you saw a person on South Point Pier today with a fishing pole, openly carrying, would you walk up and ask them for ID?
I may confront them and be like, "Hey, how you doing?" Just to investigate a little.
Okay. You wouldn't walk out there with a gun, though, would you? Pointed at.
Objection in the
Excuse
form
me.
of the question.
Excuse me. You wouldn't walk out there and point a gun at them just because they were fishing on the pier.
If they were
Objection in
fishing,
the form of the question.
if they were fishing, I had no reason to believe they were a sovereign citizen or anybody else, but just a normal person fishing. My suspicion level is a lot lower than it was on that day.